You are listening to the Enormocast.
So Tradsters, tell me who loves you more than Black Diamond. Wait, your mom? Give me a break. She may be good for a warm meal and an emergency check when the Sprinter turbo shits the bed. But when did your mom ever reduce your rack weight by 30% with a still futuristic cam like the Ultralight Camelot? In the last 5 years, Black Diamond has refined and redesigned their cams over and over to give you the best protection money can buy. And now, guess what? They took the venerable C3 and X4 and replaced them with the Z4. Wait, what? Just listen. The likes of Hazel Finley and Carla Traversi helped with these from the ground up. Get it? And then Hazel sent Magic Line just to prove their worth. So are they only good for 514? Of course not. They're good whenever you need a low-profile, hard-sticking cam that won't wobble around in your hand like a slippery hot dog when you pull the trigger. So go to blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop to check out the Z4, the latest in a continuing tradition of cam refinement from the climber engineers at Black Diamond. Tell them your mom sent you.
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
big
big
house.
place,
Sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000 seats?
You
really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Cluse. It is February 30th, 2020. Still 2020. 2020 is just like grinding the gears. Keeps getting more and more spicy. And by spicy, I kind of mean shitty. But here we are on the Enormocast. You're here, I'm here. So let's not dwell on that. It's about 10 o'clock, and this is episode 199. 199, which is hard to believe. I know I say that a lot, but I don't know. Creeping up there towards 200, it's kind of sinking in. Anyhow, this is a conversation with my coach. I have a coach. The Enormocast has a coach. That's the big reveal on this one. And that coach is Kris Hampton of Power Company Climbing. Kris has been on the show before, episode 38. If you want to find out more about Kris and his life, pretty much before Power Company Climbing, because it didn't exist, I don't think, when we started talking. And he's transformed himself several times. And the newest transformation is creating this training company. And we decided to do something. I got excited to train. And since we're friends and we thought maybe we could do some media with it, we got after it. It's all explained in the interview. This one is a lot about me and what it took to get my ass into the gym and actually start training. Now, this was last year, so this was before the Corona lockdown where everybody was forced to do it. So yeah, that's what this episode is about. So if you're one of those folks that don't like when I talk too much, then this probably isn't for you. But those people probably aren't listening anymore anyway, because I always talk too much. So you moved on to some other more journalistic type climbing podcasts. Anyhow, I'm going to talk a little bit more afterwards this time. So why don't we get to it? Again, if you want to find out more about Kris, you can go back to episode 38, or you can go check out Power Company Climbing at powercompanyclimbing.com. And also while you're there, you can check out Kris's new book. He mentions it in the interview, but it's finally out. It's called The Hard Truth, illustrated by Brendan Leonard. of Semi-Rad, who's been on the show a couple times. And it's a series of essays, mostly about overcoming excuses. And let me tell you, excuses, man. I'm sort of a connoisseur. But anyway, let's talk about hangboards, climbing in the gym. Apropos of the times, I think, especially the hangboard talk. Although gyms are about to start opening again, I feel. Are we going to go? Are you going to go to the gym, whether it opens or not? It's going to take some thought before I just march in there and start touching those holds. I'll be honest. All right, episode 199, conversation with my coach. Look, folks, you've been hitting that hangboard like a swole gibbon, doing repeaters until your veins twist into ridiculous words like venga. Your homemade wall is splintered and worn with your thrice daily prostrations. But what if, just maybe, power, endurance, and power endurance, whatever that is, isn't actually what's holding you back? In fact, it's your lousy footwork after all. That's where Sportiva comes in. Sportiva has the best line of climbing shoes in the world for when you stop hanging around and actually have to climb something. From legends like the Mira and Squama to new standards like the Solution Comp. And don't forget the TC Pro, the only shoe to free solo El Cap. Remember that? So when the hangboard is once again cobwebbed over, or just that place you stash your one-hitter, do what you've always done and stand on your feet with Sportiva. Check it all out at Sportiva.com, or as soon as your local shop is open and ready for your business, rush right down there and give them some money.
Because there's just so much rhetoric flying around on the internet about you should never lose weight for climbing, you know? And I'm like, that's a bullshit statement. Like, of course, sometimes you should. Sometimes you shouldn't.
Right.
But it's far more nuanced than you should do one thing or another.
Ever since I did the first round of my
you've been super.
I actually skipped breakfast for like 3 days. I mean, I used to skip breakfast a lot just
Wrong
because
answer.
I'm not that hungry early in the morning, and so I'll go to like 10:30, 11. But this time I was like, oh,
wrong
man.
answer. I skip breakfast by accident all the time.
That's more the case. Like I buy a burrito. Like when I used to paint, I buy a burrito and then find it frozen solid in my car. You know, at lunchtime.
Are you not painting anymore?
Not really.
Oh, no way.
I mean, I do paint. I just don't do it like full time for a person. I've been
good
lately. Yeah, no, I had to.
It's so hard on your body.
Totally. No, and it's something we'll maybe get into in here. But
that means I can push you in the gym even harder.
That's right. Yeah.
Sweet. That's why you've been holding that information back.
Well, I've been painting, but I've been doing it on trades and stuff, and like every once in a while. And then I've been remodeling my house, and so I mean, yesterday I was lifting soffits above my head and putting them in by myself, which was I had this whole operation where I was like getting them up there and then clamping them, and then so I'm still doing the manual labor bullshit, and will be because I got to build a deck, got to put siding on the house, all this stuff. Although I won't be able to do that by myself.
You came with your excuses prepared.
Yes, totally. No, I have one specific excuse, and he's almost 4 years old, but
that's a real thing.
Yeah. So speaking of that, what how do you want to frame this, you think? Or have any ideas, or should we just start talking about my dirty little secret?
I'm fine either way. Okay. Let's just start talking. Okay, see where it goes.
Yeah, that's how this normally works, right? How yours works too.
Yeah,
so that's what we're good at.
I don't have time to frame.
Or are we
shit.
good at it? I don't know.
We've convinced ourselves we're good
decide.
at it.
Yeah. So I have this. I sort of have this dirty little secret, and I've hinted at it.
It's funny that it's a dirty little secret.
The reason I say that jokingly is because when it does come up, or people, even in the gym where I'm climbing, realize that I'm over there looking at my phone and like doing specific things, everybody's just kind of astounded. So it's part of like who I framed myself as, I think, as a climber.
Right.
But also like anyone who knows me as my personality and who I have been as a climber, they're surprised that I climb indoors at all. Mm-hmm. Which I think is unfair. That's not something I've ever avoided. We don't have a gym up until recently.
You chastised me for for that in our first conversation.
Did I?
Years ago.
What did I say?
I said something about I know you hate gym climbing,
Right.
and you're like, don't you pigeonhole me, sir.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I talk out of hand occasionally and maybe make wild claims about likes and dislikes that are not necessarily true.
The whole world seems to think you don't like gym climbing.
Well,
so.
the truth is actually I like gym climbing more than most people do. Because like I was just saying to Drew that when I come to somewhere like Denver or Boulder and I get to go to a proper like modern gym, I mean, I'm as giddy as going to a new cliff.
Yeah.
Like I just walk in and I'm like super stoked. And and so many other people are like just there to get it done before they go to work or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, cool. Another 512. Oh, look at this one. This one looks sweet. Oh my God, look at that wall. Like I'm a total geek, So so that kind of like is the opposite of what you'd think. Now, have I ever been a person that like bangs it out in the gym? I haven't. So I guess that's kind of like the difference. But back to the little secret, what I've been doing for several months.
Yeah, it's probably almost been a year.
Yeah, well, I want to say it kind of got started in earnest like later in the spring, but nevertheless, we've been talking about it for a while, and I've been training with Kris. I've been training with Power Company Climbing, an actual program of sorts. Very kindly, you've been doing my custom training plan yourself, which I understand, that's...
You're kind of a nightmare to deal with. You're my nightmare client.
Really?
No.
Okay.
I'm totally kidding. No,
I was gonna
not at
say,
all.
Really? No. But anyway, so it's been going on because what happened was we got a gym in Carbondale, bouldering gym, the Monkey House. Really nice, small, but like fully modern facility. And I kind of like didn't really know how to use it. And, like anybody else, I go in and sort of wander around and do some problems and maybe get pumped and maybe not and go home. And so that was like impetus number one. Secondly, like I felt like I was falling apart. I had lots of aches and pains, especially in the shoulders. And then as my son was getting a little bit older, I was getting less and less time. And so it's like if I was going to go to the gym and just goof off for an hour and a half, that wasn't going to do anything. It probably was going to hurt me, actually. So I approached Kris. I said, hey, can we do this? I think it'll be kind of funny on your part to have to train this old curmudgeon, but take it seriously, and then maybe like we'll do some media from it later on. And since we both have podcasts,
and I'm basically an old curmudgeon as well, so I know how it goes.
Yeah, we're not dissimilar, not just in appearance, which many people, even as recently as about 10 minutes ago, commented on. Nice job on that Malcolm Daly podcast, by the way, Kris.
Sorry, Mason. I had to tell.
Malcolm Daly's son thanked Kris for his dad's podcast, which was me.
Happens regularly.
Yeah. So, so it's a good meeting of the minds, and. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at now. We thought we'd have a little like catch up.
Yeah,
it's been enough months that something should have happened.
Yeah.
So
and first, let me jump into kind of our first conversation.
Okay.
So initially, when you called me, I was in the airport on my way to Australia, and when I got off the phone, I was like, "There's about a 50% chance of this actually happening," because I hear a lot of people, off the cuff say, I want to train. I want to do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. On January 1st, usually.
Yeah. And then they just never follow through, never show up. So I understand that like there's some crisis going on in their life and they need to take control of something and they think I'm going to take control of my training, and then crisis dissipates or whatever and they totally forget about the training, And I just assumed that was going to happen because it seems to happen often. But you wanted to get started, and my initial plan was just let's get him in the gym and get him to enjoy the process of going in and like working on things that are uncomfortable, because I know you're that type who goes into the gym and is like, I'm going to climb the 512. I'm going to climb this 512. I'm going to go climb this thing. All things that you know you're going to be able to climb and you're relatively comfortable on, you know, and I wanted to push you outside of that comfort zone. So my initial plan was just, let's get you into this process.
Right. And do you remember what we talked about goals?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of remember. Do you kind of remember what we talked about?
Very vaguely.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things I was told, not by you, but other people, like to have a very concrete, specific goal, you know, not a route, maybe a number or something like that, which actually kind of went against my instinct a little bit. But I did say 13C because I had never climbed that hard, which is, it's awesome because the internet actually thinks I climb harder than I do because of the Enormocast, I think. So so it's nice. I've benefited from just this vague notion that I know how to climb.
That's a good bump to get out of the podcast.
So, and the other thing is, you know, speaking of us being confused, because of our names, I used to get confused with Chris Knuth.
Oh, right. Sure.
Who put up the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was happy to accept that as well on my resume. And actually I've since met Chris Knuth.
Is he still around Rifle?
He made sort of a heavy appearance. I wasn't around that much this summer. Maybe he was around, but he was around the last couple of years again after being gone for a really long time.
Wasn't he like a UPS guy or something?
Truck driver.
Driver?
Some delivery, I think. Yeah. Like not a long haul guy, but a local kind of truck driver guy. Yeah. So a little bit outside of the mold of your normal climber. But anyway, I had heard, not from him, but I had heard previously that he also, you know, had been accused of being a big wall climber. So
interesting.
So I said that, you know, combined, we were like the best rock climber in the world.
I don't ever get confused with Chris Sharma. I don't understand.
Me neither. But yeah, the Knuth-Kalus climber, if you could combine, what is it, 14C? Is that the crew? Yeah, with A5, like that's pretty good. It's pretty wide breadth of.
That's Tommy Caldwell.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know about A5.
And I don't know A5 either.
You know who it is?
He free climbs A5.
It's almost. I don't know how hard a free climb, but it's almost Randy Levitt.
Oh yeah, good.
Plus, the dude could crack climb. So I've maintained for years that he is historically one of the best all-around American climbers of all time.
You might be right.
Because he not only climbed A5, he established A5.
Yeah.
And he well into the 514s. I don't know. You might know better than me.
First, we have to define aid climbing as climbing.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So that's a bit of a stretch to begin with.
Don't put the climbing word on it. But anyhow, back to us.
Yeah, 13C. And you had this big crack project.
Yeah, I have this crack project that remains a project. And partially this month has been terrible weather out there. But then the other thing that I kind of really had in my mind, despite, you know, wanting to have these concrete projects, was this idea of maintaining, and I kind of felt like I was getting weaker and therefore was kind of falling apart a little bit. It was it just felt like, well, as my muscles were getting weaker, then they used to protect my joints, and so I was having shoulder issues, just pain and some tweaks that would keep me out for a couple of days, some elbow pain that was kind of chronic. So in my mind, as I'm getting older, I'm 40. I was 47. I'm 48 now, almost 49. It just felt like if I'm not careful and keep at something, I'm just gonna like fall apart into injury. And so really, that was like my biggest underlying thing of like, give me some way in which to use my time to stay in shape. If I get some like push in performance, awesome, and that would be great, and obviously that's in my head too, but the really like the maintaining into the future, not just now, not just in the last 6 months, but giving me these tools to be able to maintain as long as I possibly can.
Right.
And looking at, you know, the guys that do that and have done that, you know, the Bill Ramseys and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. You want to be the 513 Bill Ramsey.
Fantastic, you know, or just, I mean, even like,
it's a damn good goal to shoot for. Yeah.
And even Boone Speed, you know, he's younger than Bill, but he's like, I like to be in the kind of shape where I can climb you know, he said an 8A or maybe it was 8B, I don't know. 8A, I think is what he said. Just like, I want to be able to go anywhere and still climb that hard. And that's actually about as hard as I've ever climbed, but there's all sorts of reasons for that too. But yeah, so that was like our initial conversation.
Yep.
And thinking about the ways in which people use training, I wasn't even sure what it was. I mean, obviously, in my head, it's like, yeah, you train so you can climb harder. But I kind of had this whole like notion of like, well, let's train to keep going.
Yeah, and you know, my take on it initially was that, I mean, our muscles, our tendons like to be loaded. They like to be loaded consistently and in consistent ways. And if you're just, you know, playing with your son around the house or painting, and then you go out and go rock climbing, your body's constantly like, what the hell's going on? You know,
Right.
We get to go climbing twice a month or 3 times a month or whatever, and we're doing all these other new things, and then we're expected to go out and perform again, you know, and it's just not conducive to the kind of maintenance or the kind of performance that you want.
Right.
So getting in the gym with a plan, making sure we're loading your body in specific ways that are going to be similar in some ways to the way you're performing outside is just going to make it so that you're feeling better when you show up under the project or whatever outside,
Right.
you know?
Well, and also the thing too, I mean, we're friends. We've become friends actually since you did the podcast is I think the first way we've done it, but we've climbed together, we've become friends. So I trust you on that level, but I also was interested in the fact that you're not, you know, you're not 25 either.
I'm not a spring chicken, as my grandpa would say.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
there was some camaraderie there of like, okay, he knows what I'm talking about, like has some experience with this. So that was also, I had a lot of confidence, but I also was like, I was excited to be able to have fun in the gym and not like ever feel like I was just reporting and kind of, like I said,
Yeah, and I think these kind of things can be fun. They don't have to just be punching the clock.
Right.
You know, it might seem that way from the outside looking in, and it can be that way. It can be really dry and just drudgery, but it can also be pretty fun and challenging. you know?
Right. So the one thing too is, you know, excuses. It's funny you said, yeah, you've already got your excuses lined up. This is true. But, you know, it's funny because my son, the Enormo baby, as he's known to the Enormocast world, although he's almost 4.
And he's not that enormous, actually.
Yeah, he's
so.
actually really little. I know, it's funny. It's like I cursed him by calling him that. He's actually always been, since not long after he's born, he's been like in the 5th percentile for everything. So he's a little tiny nugget. But it's funny because he's both the impetus for this in a lot of ways, and he's also the excuse.
The biggest challenge.
Yeah. And so, because it was partially, you know, if I had just maintained my lifestyle previous to him, then I probably wouldn't have had that feeling of like I'm losing it, because I could have just kept climbing outdoors as much as I want, which is how I've climbed my whole life. Like,
and it's kind of a trap, to be honest.
What's that?
You know, being able to climb outside all the time.
Right.
You know, you have to be a really hugely motivated person to keep making progress if all you're ever doing is climbing outside. It's kind of hard to do, especially if you have the same areas to climb in over and over and over, if you're not traveling a ton. And a gym is a really good way to get out of that, you know, getting the same stimulus over and over and over and be able to see progress. So I think it's kind of a trap to be able to go outside and just climb whenever you want to.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I mean, I literally hadn't progressed in 20 years. I mean, I maintained, but honestly, I probably climbed 13A and I think 1997 maybe for the first time, 98. And I climbed.
You were badass back then.
Yeah, it was all right. It was all right for recreational climber guy. But I mean, I've climbed 13B. Yeah. Like since then, and I could pretty fairly safely say I climbed 13 every year since then almost.
And that's the cycle I see. I see a lot of people like hit this grade, and then they'll, after that project is over, there are kind of two types of people. One will just move on to the next project. The other will take some time and either do some on-siting, they'll travel to do some on-siting, they'll do some moderates, and then they'll pick another project about the same grade.
Right.
And and that cycle just repeats itself over years and years and years and years, and sometimes it's only a letter grade different over those decades.
Well, it's kind of just prioritizing too, because you just nailed it. I mean, that's been my climbing life of, I'll do some sport climbing, and then it'll switch over to this and switch over to this and travel. And I definitely don't like getting bogged down in heavy projecting traveling. I don't travel to do that. So, yeah, and it just comes down to the fact that, I mean, for the longest time I could do a 13A with not that many tries.
Right.
And so it's kind of what's important to you, which is, again, why it kind of was tricky for me to nail down these concrete projects when we started talking about this. But, it still comes down to wanting to progress.
Yeah, and just on the subject of, having concrete projects, I do think they're super important to have. In your case, I'm less concerned about those super concrete projects. Now at the point where we're at now, we could start digging more into those. And I would push you toward finding a project in Rifle or nearby your house somewhere, instead of only having this desert crack project that you have to travel to, and you can't just cherry pick the better days.
Right.
So if we're really focused on those concrete projects, that's the way I would start pushing, is let's also find one close to your house that we can really dig into. Yeah,
for sure. And the crack project is a little incidental. I mean, it existed before I was trying to do this. And yeah, definitely this spring, as soon as I mean, it's funny because I have all these friends now that are like invested in my training, and they're actually picking out routes for me to get on this spring. So it's kind of funny because, I mean, it's like I haven't really participated in that world, and now they're like kind of stoked that I am. Yeah. Which is encouraging, and it's helpful for sure. So let me ask you this. So when you got all this information and you're like, okay, he's, maybe he'll do it, maybe he doesn't. And then I got back in touch with you because we did let it simmer for a while. And then we kind of like, all right, let's do this. So what did you think about when you initially created this project? You were talking about getting me out of my comfort zone. But then when it got more specific to my needs, what were you thinking about?
So the thing that I most often see, and I was totally going on generalizations, and I had climbed with you a little, so I'd seen you climb, and and I knew it was a dumpster fire.
Exactly. Of like desperate, somehow he got up that route kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know how he just did that. Didn't even look like he was climbing.
That's the jam, dude. That's been my bread and butter. Like, what did this guy? I was climbing in Spain, in this total random guy that was like kind of on the periphery of these folks that I knew and was climbing with. He was just like, you are not, he's something like, you're not the best climber at the crag, but you are the funnest to watch. And literally, this is a true story, I was like, oh, that's nice of you to say, I guess, like I'm thinking like, he's like, but I climbed, I was like, thanks a lot. And moments later, I'm climbing this, like, this is in Sirana, I'm climbing this, like, I don't know, 12B or something like that. And I like get through the crux, and I kick the draw beneath me and unclip the fucking rope. And I swear to God, that dude just starts cackling. I was just like, so now I'm like finishing the next section after the crux, like with looking at like this like 40-footer. Yeah, no, I was like, thanks,
I love
dude.
That
and
guy.
He just was like the best. He was like, that was the best. So anyway,
that's amazing.
To your point,
yeah, totally. No, what I see a lot, especially with older climbers and particularly trad climbers, people who've come up climbing trad, is a really specific style and set of values within their movement. And generally speaking, that's that they move slower, they move more statically, more precise. A lot of climbers who like learn to climb in the early 90s or thereabouts really value this super smooth, fluid, precise, really controlled climbing, because that's what we saw. It's what, we all wanted to be Ron Kauk or, whatever. And we watched that and wanted to emulate that. And And because of the nature of a lot of trad climbing, that's just become what we really value, and me included. And getting you outside of those parameters was kind of mission number one. Like, let's put some drills in. Let's get you on walls that are going to demand you being more dynamic, learning to value swinging your body around a little more, as opposed to just being slow and controlled. And in rifle, a lot of times you can be slow and kind of wall crawl, but there are a lot of routes there that are going to demand you be really dynamic and be explosive, and to be able to switch between the two,
Right.
which is super valuable to have. So that was mission one.
Steve Hong still crawls up roots.
Well, of course he does. He can,
Exactly.
He can crush holds to dust and his fingers never open. He's allowed to crawl. We don't have that capability. Right. So that was mission number one. And then mission number two was just to get you established in some sort of a rhythm, and for me to learn your schedule and what your travel and all of that was going to look like. I would say the one area I didn't anticipate the big challenge was the fact that your son is a germ factory and is constantly making you sick.
Yeah, it's been a rough winter.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's been, I think, the roughest challenge from my end, because I can't say go to the gym anyway.
Right.
I don't believe in that. I don't think that's the way, and it's just not responsible for you to go into the gym and cough all over the moon board.
Right. Those holds are covered in enough fecal matter to begin with. We found out from that one study. So
I don't even want to know about it. It's disgusting.
Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Fecal matter.
That's why I don't climb on the moon board. That's why I only climb in my gym.
Right. Yeah. It's all your own fecal matter. Can't hurt you.
Yeah. Exactly. No. So that was priority one, and I think that can take up quite a bit of time. Actually, a lot of the other stuff was, let's just get you feeling solid and into the mode of training, and address the shoulders and just address general movement patterns and health and get you feeling strong, and the rest of it just kind of comes. But I was mostly interested in breaking you out of your trad climber, slow, slothy mode.
Well, I was climbing, maybe 3 weeks ago on the moon board, and Andrew Bisharat was there, and he was like, "Wow, you look like a boulderer."
Yeah.
And that was a comment based on what you're talking about. Like, It was the first time he'd seen me like climb like I'm bouldering and not the crawling or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's big.
Yeah.
And people will avoid that forever if they can, and it'll hold them back for a long, long time, and they'll just never address it. It seems scary, seems challenging. That's not my style.
Right.
They don't value being able to do that. So why do it?
Well, and I think, for me, I think about this while climbing those kind of routes, and I haven't been able to climb outdoors very much either this winter, time-wise, but also it got pretty crummy there for the last couple months. But I'm interested to see if I can translate that, because it's pretty specific to the moon board and a few other sort of sections of the climbing gym.
Yep.
And that's in my mind of like, well, if I'm up on some route, am I going to be able to like suddenly, without the conditions being the same as I'm used to, have I conditioned myself to like stepping onto the kicker and, or the kickboard and like, can I like step into that moment? So I'm kind of excited to, when Andrew said that, it kind of made me think like, oh, maybe I can just like translate this to some crux move, 5 or 6 bolts up on a route.
Yep. I think it's going to show up in small ways first. It generally does, just in like the ability to use more momentum for a move, or the ability to discover that that's the solution faster. So instead of trying to do the crux move 8 different ways, slow and static, you pretty quickly discover that, oh, if I use momentum here and I understand that momentum and I can pull the trigger faster, then I can get through this much quicker, you know? So I think it'll show up in those small ways first. It's not like you're going to be Sharma and you're going to, you know, be jumping all over everything, but it will show up in the ways that you use momentum and let it go. You know, I think that's the big thing. We want to control constantly those type of climbers like I used to be. And letting go of that control is tough. So learning it in the gym and then taking it out to your project is probably the best way to do it.
Because, that's another thing about you that I think has sort of gotten lost in distant memory is that you were,
I was hard traddy. Yeah.
And the off-width guy, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I moved as slow as possible.
Right.
It was like horrible.
It's like it's like an image you've buried.
Well, you know, just recently, Nate, one of my coaches, very politely asked me to re-record some of our early drill videos because my version of what it looked like to climb with momentum looks like most people's sloth, you know, like this super slow. And now the way I climb with momentum is drastically different, just from years of working on it and trying to understand how momentum works. So I've become a lot better climber by embracing that style, but it took real work to get it through my head that it was valuable. Right.
We're going to do an embarrassing part of this thing in a moment. I mean, I have it planned in my head. We didn't really game this out, but we're going to do a public sort of evaluation from you.
Okay.
Which I'm sort of, like trepidatious about. But I mean, the whole point of doing this podcast is about talking about training, I think, for a lot of listeners who don't really know about what it really means, and also, is it for you? Is it something that could be useful in your life? And that was originally when we sat down and did it. I was like, well, why don't we do this? And it'll be like, some sort of guinea pig, because I think a lot of my listeners are in my boat and not as old as me, but and what you just said about, it's almost like we have these like burned in limitations in our head. We don't think we do.
Definitely do. Yeah.
But a coach is going to look at you and see all this shit that you don't think you're doing or not doing.
For sure.
And that was a big part of when we first started this. Was a kind of a, I mean, I guess I knew it because I know the difference. But to have it really pointed out, I was like, oh, yeah, I don't really know how to do that. And I don't really know how to do that. And I do think of myself as this certain type of climber. And breaking out of those sorts of things is
this
cool.
is my style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just go ahead and say what I think happened in terms of the positives that I got out of it.
Okay. And then I'll just tell you everything you did wrong.
Yeah. Well, no, and then I'll say some of the stuff that I thought was problematic, and then you can, chime in, or maybe we'll just switch turns.
Let's do it.
I mean, the big thing for me was learning how to use the gym. Mm-hmm. It's a bouldering gym. So I'm definitely inclined, if I go to a gym, to climb on ropes. Mm-hmm. And so that was like number one, to use the boards. And it wasn't really that you taught me how to use, the moon board. I knew how to use it, but it forced me to use it. And it forced me to kind of break through. I mean, that thing is brutal. Yeah. And it's a total ego and soul crushing experience to try to climb on that wall and then, peek into this world and then, deal with like projecting V3 for, 6 or 7 weeks or whatever, or longer in my case. But it forced me to kind of use it. And actually after, it was kind of like rifle. I always talk about how people go to rifle and hate it. And then you just like, it grows on you like a fungus, and then you turn out it's like the most awesome place.
Yeah.
The moonboard I feel about is exactly the same way. I love it. I totally love it. And I worked on the kilter board, and I got in trouble with the kilter people because I complained about how steep it was. This is a whole nother podcast, but whatever. The kilter board is really steep at our gym. It's like 55 degrees.
Right.
So I get on it, but it's not my true love.
Yeah. And, just as an aside there's a lot of argument about what's the best steepness to train on. And frankly, I mean, I love really steep climbing, but frankly, most of the climbing we do outside is on less steep angles.
Right.
So, unless you're really climbing on super steep things regularly, it's just almost not worth it to be on like 55, 60 degrees regularly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and it's just the way at the gym, it just fits. The Kilter board only fits in this one part where it has to be that steep.
Yep.
And then we have a tension board, which I've only started to dabble on.
Yeah. Also soul crushing and finger crushing.
Yeah. And the reason the moon board appealed to me is because we already had one in the valley at a friend's house. And so those guys who train down there, you know, we can talk about the same stuff together. So, but that was cool. The other thing was I had never really used a hangboard in any prolific way, you know.
Right.
I did the same thing most people do, where it's like
you probably had 3 you won at raffles or something.
Yeah. No, actually I got one as a gear review, but then I bought one. Actually, I think I might have just prior to this, as you know, again, like you're just like, I'm going to do this. And then you read about it in, you know, an article in the magazine and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound so bad. But I did it for real. And that was cool, is learning how to use that. And also the idea of using weights, weighted hangs was something I hadn't even really thought about. And I mean, those two things were a big positive for me. And then also sort of being forced to warm up in an actual like set way, you know, like a progressive way, as opposed to just like, I'm going to do a few easy problems and then I'll try the project. Right. So those things were, I think, kind of knowledge based that you sort of got me into. I did have, I mean, my shoulders haven't bothered me in months, and that alone is like worth the price of admission. And I'm not sure how you sort of thought about that in terms of the way I was climbing, but I think the warm-up has a lot to do with it, actually.
For sure. And just making sure we're not doing tons of volume, you know, all the time. I think that's kind of the go-to for, like, oh, I want to get better at climbing. I'm going to do laps upon laps upon laps. And then you're getting into this really fatigued state and just lunging for holds, and that's where we get into a ton of trouble with our shoulders. Okay. It's not so much bouldering as it is sport climbing, frankly.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that's helped because I've been doing a lot of bouldering. Also the tendonitis, I had tennis elbow, that's inside, right?
Yes.
Whatever.
I think so.
I had the inside, and that's gone too, which I'm really surprised at, because I definitely like am to my mind, counterintuitively, I'm grabbing much smaller holds and pulling much harder than I ever have in my life, because I just never was a boulderer. And like I never have had a pulley injury. And I think it's partially genetics, but it's also partially that I let go. Like I just don't, I don't pull the holds hard enough, you know? But I mean, the moon board is forcing me to do harder pulling than I've really ever done probably in my life, at least consistently. And yet, my elbows feel fine.
Well, I think that's why. Like, you're doing it consistently.
Oh, okay.
And tendons, frankly, just really like to be loaded. Okay. So when you're not loading them, they get upset, and, you know, then you just throw some random load at them, you know, every 7 days or something.
Right.
They're not as happy as if you're doing it every couple days or every 3 days. And so hangboarding is actually, it gets a bad rap for elbows, and I think it's probably one of the better things for your elbows.
Cool. Well, and we haven't been doing, which I've been, maybe was by design in terms of this injury thing or pain thing, but we haven't been doing straight up campusing. Hasn't been part of any of my workouts.
Yeah, I
appreciate because it's
I don't use it that often.
Okay.
You know, occasionally, and this is something we might explore in the future, I would have somebody do it with feet on, and then, you know, just coordinating those big explosive moves.
Well, you've had me doing that.
Yeah, just
but
a few
feet
of
on
those.
And then, it makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, a few of those a session is what I would generally start people with. And then you know, you could do a little bit of contact strength stuff on small rungs, but I think the campus board is another one of those tools that's just gotten radically misused and misunderstood. And frankly, it's just this thing that somebody dreamt up years ago, and for some reason we have this like construct of it has to be this angle, the rungs have to be this far apart, and if it's not right, you know, which is just crazy talk, because it was just this thing that happened to be there. So,
yeah, in Germany.
Yeah. So it's really not that useful a tool for how most people use it, but for like measuring endurance with your feet on, just laddering. It's a really low technical way to, it takes a lot of the technical failure out of the equation, so you can really measure what's happening in your forearms, or just to coordinate explosive moves. I really like it.
Right. Yeah. And it's, it's rough. So
yeah. And that is an elbow killer for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah.
And shoulders.
So hasn't been in there. We've been doing a little bit of it, and then the two last things that I think, and this is something that if I was encouraging other people to look into something like this, is it teaches you awesome time management. And that was one of my goals, was just like, please, Kris, if I can run over to the gym for an hour and a half, tell me what I can do to like get the most out of that hour and a half. And if you can not talk to everybody, that's even better.
Yeah.
You kind of have, Tim Emmett told me this when I interviewed him, like, he just, kind of has to be an asshole in the gym. And just like, that's hard for the Enormocast to do, but
I know I have a reputation of that. Yeah. And now
of just being grumpy and not talking to people because you're busy. Yeah.
And I would just tell people, like, I'm in the middle of a workout. Right. Like, I can't discuss that right now. But now that I'm a coach and do the podcast and everybody wants to talk to me, I have to be nicer.
That's your business
model. So I built my gym at my house and I don't leave.
Fuck power company climbing. That guy's a dick.
Yeah, it can. I don't go to commercial gyms expecting to get a workout in anymore, because
that's true.
It's going to be lots of just chatting with people.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. I get recognized, and it takes a few minutes. But
when you're in your town,
it's of my own. So. It's of my own doing, like me talking.
Yep.
So, and then finally, and this is also something I think that's really, really important and maybe not highlighted very often for me, and I think for people again who are at my level or want what I'm getting out of it, is that just the fact that you think someone is paying attention to whether you fucking go or not.
Yeah.
And then the fact that we're friends as well, although probably would be even more so if I didn't know you.
Yeah.
Like, it's like somehow, and I think there's so many weird places in life where a stranger's opinion of you is more important than anybody else's.
Totally.
We go down a rabbit hole with that, but the fact is that if I didn't go, and I didn't go a lot. There was a lot of times I didn't go, which I'm sure I'm going to hear about. But that's when the donuts come out. But the fact just that, oh man, I'm disappointed, Kris. I'm disappointed in my coach.
Yeah.
Like, I was definitely scrambling a lot to just make it happen. And the downside to a lot of the stuff is I didn't end up having the kind of time I told you I would have.
Right.
It just changes all the time, and it didn't. I definitely was. My estimations were a little bit high because with a kid and then with my girlfriend working a lot, like more set time than I am, and in a lot of ways harder than I am. There not only was it just literally I couldn't leave because I had my son, but also there's always these politics of like. And a lot of it's internal. Like,
sure,
she's not necessarily guilt tripping me. I'm guilt tripping myself.
Totally.
Of like, so negotiating an hour here, an hour there is actually, and so many people listening are going to be like, yes, this is the truth. And those are all excuses, but it was tricky. And then also, like, I tended to go a lot at night, and like when I try to do one of these evaluations last week, I was kind of low energy anyway, but then I think like trying to do your best evaluation stuff at like 8:30 at night it's just physiologically dumb.
It's tough.
Your body's like shutting down, getting ready for bed or whatever, so all those things kind of mixed up. But the thing about being kind of watched and forced to go, and maybe I'm just like have a weak will because there's somebody out there like Bill Ramsey who can just force himself to go no matter how he feels.
Yeah,
I definitely benefited from just like, I'm letting Kris down again. Like, man, it's been since Tuesday. He's probably, I had this image that you were just getting full on.
I'm just gonna send you another message, like, just checking on you.
Yeah, or minute by minute updates. Then you're just like, Annalisa, I fucking can't believe Calusi's not. This is like the third day he hasn't got. It's just like,
I wouldn't tell it to her. She doesn't want to hear it.
But it's like this fantasy that I'm on your mind the whole time. Like,
yeah, that accountability is big.
Yeah.
A lot of people really, really need that. And then some people don't. So as a coach, it's tough to know how much communication to give to a person. Like, is it going to be helpful if somebody only goes once a week? Probably, if they were going 0 times a week before.
Right.
So even if I would love to see them getting 4 sessions in a week, if they're getting in 1, great. I'll send some gentle nudges, and maybe they don't want any more than that. So it's tough.
Right.
Like you and I probably communicate less than most of the people that I work with. And I know that you're busy with the kid, busy with re-roofing your house before the snow comes, and you've got all these things going on too. So I also don't want to seem pushy, because I still want it to be fun. I want it to be something you want to go do, as opposed to me having to push you into there. If I have to push you in, then there's probably something wrong with the sessions, and we can slim them back or dial it in a little tighter, make it easier to complete, So I don't want to be constantly pushing you, but I do every morning see what everybody did the day before. So
that helps. That's going to help me. Not my fantasies were not fantasies, but I know you were, because I'd get messages from you, and that they weren't gentle pushing necessarily, but they were messages. So of like what's going on, and everything else, and
sometimes I'll just high five somebody's comment or thumbs up to somebody's comment, just to let them know, like. And I'm just talking about comments on their workouts and notes in their workouts. I'll just high five it to let people know, okay, I'm watching, I'm checking on you, good job in there.
Well, other tricky things to overcome for me was, recording things on the app. I mean, I know this is like so cliche for some old guy to say this.
Oh,
but
I get it, man.
Like it definitely took me a while to I'd go back to the app and I hadn't actually saved the information or whatever, which then I'm like, oh man, no, he didn't see that I did it, like then it would like bum me out. So I got better at that as well. And then I definitely also like had to compress things a little bit, and then I also had to figure out like what you're asking me to do didn't always sort of fit with our gym.
Right.
And so, and I think that like at first that kind of made me anxious, but then I just was like, no, I can like figure this out. We don't have like a spray wall with just like tons of holes. It's all set problems. So like when, something would say, find like 10 problems that you can, do fairly easily or whatever. It's like, well, we don't really have that many of that specific type. But of course, once I got good enough at the moon board that I could do some stuff on there. And then I could also have projects that wouldn't leave. Because the other thing is our whole gym gets stripped. I mean, this is any gym problem where your project disappears after a few minutes or a few months or a few weeks or whatever. So
that's a real issue. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we can't like create really easy templates that we can just use over and over. We do have some template plans that we've made pretty generalized for people at specific levels of climbing, kind of the patterns we've seen at those levels. And then you can buy that with a coach or without a coach. And the benefit of having the coach is exactly what you're talking about. Like I can't do that at my gym. So how do I modify this to fit my situation, And all of our custom plans are like that because every gym is different, and it does make it, gyms are moving in a direction that make it kind of tough to improve, because what they've done is, we have demanded faster turnover. We want more problems. And now the longest a boulder stays up in a lot of gyms is 4 weeks or something. So what happens is they'll change, say, 4 sections of the gym. You come in, you do all the boulders you can do first night in the new set, and then your second night of the week, you come in and you project a boulder for 30 minutes till you do it. And then you come in the next week and you climb all the boulders you can do on the new set, and you just go through this cycle over and over where you're staying at the same grades and you never actually get to project anything, you know? So people get stuck in this loop. So thank goodness for boards, you know, the moon board, tension board, kilter board are really great tools to have forever projects, and you can have circuits on there once you learn it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But that's like the thing, too, to people listening. What I said earlier about having like break through the barrier to the boards, because I think so many climbers, even pretty good climbers, they, you know, the boards exist out of the corner of their eye over there with the guys with their shirts off.
Yep.
You know, and it's not your world to go into, and even a person as experienced as I am, you know, that's intimidating. You know, it's like I could wear a shirt that's like, I climbed El Cap, you know, like, get out of my way. Don't make fun of me because I'm projecting warm-up number 3, which was my project for 4 months this summer. Literally, it was called warm-up number 3. How good does that make you feel? Finally did it, though. You actually asked me to video it, and I drew the line. He's like, well, get a video of it. I'm like, I'm not videoing myself on the moon board. I do have some credibility to maintain. All right, enough about that. So let's get to it. What do you think happened? I'll just say this. I'm actually really overall proud of what I did. Will continue to do, but when, you know, it's like the app says this is your 70th workout or whatever, and I'm just like, that is 70 more workouts than I fucking would have done. Right. You know, spread out over however many months. I was still just like, wow, that's awesome. Like an awesome body of work for me to have done, even though I felt guilty about this and that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I take a pretty realistic view of it. You know, I've seen all types, and as old as you are, you're never going to make progress, so I wasn't looking for that. No, I'm
this is the kind of coach he is, people.
No.
Did you have dreams? I'm going to crush them.
No, in reality, you know, what I wanted was for you to get like psyched on it, and that's what I saw happening. And when you would like travel to your families, you'd be like, what can I do while I'm there? I'll have a hangboard. I'm going to hang up a hangboard there this time, you know, and I'm taking the TRX, and, you know, so you're taking these steps and making these changes that allow you to be able to continue with training. You know, whether I'm involved or not, you've set yourself up to be able to continue doing it. And really, that's my biggest goal with most clients, is just to instill in them a culture of challenging themselves and consistently making it into the gym to do that, or doing it at home if that's, you know, the way it goes, and not giving themselves the excuses of, oh, I'm going to see family this week, so I can't do anything. You know, there's going to be a lot of time when you're after the initial like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you in forever. There's going to be times when you want to escape and hang on the hangboard for a little while. So, you know, having it available is big. So, you know, I was proud of you for doing that and for digging into the moon board. That's mega for somebody at your ripe old ancient age. It's a hard tool to use, and, you know, you dug right in.
Well, as much as we're joking about how old I am, maybe not joking anyway, as much as we're stating how old I am, you know, it's really more of an attitude shift that had to happen.
Absolutely.
I mean, I had to be careful. I felt like I had to be careful, but it really was about like how I thought about climbing. Yeah. And what, and luckily I had some friends that introduced me to it a little bit, and I kind of like, I caught sort of the playfulness of it. Mm-hmm. And that's good. I mean, anybody who's tried the moonboard a couple times is going to like roll their eyes at the word playful, but this idea of the lights and it's really like this little game.
It totally is.
You know, and so it's like, if you can kind of, again, get to where you can do a few problems so you just don't feel terrible about yourself, you know, you can kind of get into this little fun game of it. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I've seen, I did a session with Jonathan Segrist and Ravioli Biceps. Are you familiar with him?
I've just found out about Ravioli Biceps.
King of the moonboard world.
Yeah.
I did a session with those two, in Vegas on the moonboard, and it was really fantastic for me to see the way that they operated in that space, because Segrist is by far the more accomplished outdoor climber. You know, in most situations, he's going to be the alpha, and he completely was just like, I'm going to show Ravioli Biceps all of my projects, watch him flash them, because I want to see how he does it. I want to learn from him and the way he climbs on this. You know, he's way better than I am at this tool, and I want to see it. And watching the level of psych that J-Star got out of watching Ravioli Biceps crush all of his projects was, I mean, that's the best kind of session to have, like just getting psyched on people being able to do things you can't do, and watching everybody be able to test themselves against whatever. You know, they were just as psyched for me climbing on things that are their warm-ups. You know, it was their warm-up number 3, and it's my project for the day, but they're just as stoked, and you're climbing on the same wall, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So, what else in terms of your evaluation?
Mostly the positives were what I've already said, that you got really psyched, that you learned this culture, that you were challenging yourself in these new styles. And the only, and I wouldn't even call these negatives. The communication, I think, you can see better progress from more communication. Okay. And I can put that on myself too. You know, I try to feel out what a client wants, but we don't have a good system of figuring that out yet. So I try to feel it out, and sometimes I get it wrong, you know. And I do think with like leaving more notes during your workouts, and, you know, just being a little more proactive about metacognition, sort of this thinking about your thinking, you know, these ideas and light bulb moments that you're having during the session. If you write those down after, you know, they become this concrete thing that sort of helps that lesson stick. So I like the comments that you can leave during the workouts for that reason. Even if I'm not commenting back all the time, I read them all. And when I see those little learning moments, it lets me know that things are on the right track, you know? So when there are, like you said, you know, forgetting to log things or not hitting save or whatever, it doesn't let me progress things as efficiently as we probably could. Right. So that would be my one criticism. But otherwise, I'm super happy about the way it went.
And so how did my recent
the numbers?
My recent numbers turn out?
I'm going to pull them up here. I thought they were going to be worse, to be honest with you.
Well, they would have been if I'd have done what I did last week, but I kind of like rested and sort of made a better time for it. But I was really worried too, because I just come through the holidays, and aside from all the cliche crap about, you know, eating and drinking and getting fat, which doesn't really happen to me. I eat the same amount all the time. Yep. But it was, you know, a lot of time with Miles because he was home from school, and then just a series of like, he'd get sick, I'd get sick, Steph would get sick, I'd get sick, he'd get sick, and it was pretty rough. And so I was like coming out of that feeling better, but like, oh God, and definitely like had to shake it off. But I also felt like, you know, I'd been going pretty good, and maybe a little rest wasn't the end of the world. But anyhow, that's what's leading into this evaluation that we wanted to get done before we talked this tonight.
Yeah, and I'll kind of set it up this way. So we do a battery of measurements that we get for every custom client that we have. And we've collected a lot of data over the years on a bunch of clients, and we've asked our general community to take the assessment as well, and lots of people have, and we appreciate the time that went into that from everybody. But essentially, you know, we have a data analyst who works for us. He lives in Japan working right now, named Dale Wilson, and Dale is really, really excited about numbers, and I glaze over and fall asleep when I'm looking at numbers and data. So I love having him here because he gets excited to crunch all of these, you know, hundreds and hundreds of climbers' numbers in these measurements. And what it's done for us is allow us to hand those measurements over to Dale. Dale hand us back this report that says, here are the median values we see in these specific measurements, and here's where you stack up to that. So what we try to do is say, we take your goal level, and in your case we use 13C, and here's where you stack up in these physical markers against what we see at that goal level. And that just gives us a general place to go and something to measure against in the future.
Right.
You know, if we see that your finger strength is way higher than anybody else's or way higher than the median at that grade level, then it's not something we need to put tons of effort into. But if it's really low, you know, if it's down in the 25% area, then we're going to put more effort into it.
Right.
So
yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, it just gives us a general starting point.
Yeah, if you're like hyper strong and you still haven't met your goal, then maybe there's technique that needs to be involved, or vice versa.
Yep. And when you first started, we were getting the numbers, but we didn't feel comfortable enough yet saying, here's what we think we should be seeing. And we're just now starting to feel comfortable enough to make these reports and say, here's the median value, and we trust it.
Right.
You know, we've reversed it a little and been able to somewhat predict what that person climbs by looking at their numbers. So we're feeling more and more comfortable about it.
I'd never done my ape index too. You asked me about that.
Yeah.
Which I'd never done in my life.
You had never done that?
No.
That's like crazy talk.
Yeah, it's actually not bad.
Yeah, you've got a good ape.
So that excuse, my little short Tyrannosaurus arms is no longer an excuse.
Your T-Rex
I was
arms
for
is not
sure
real.
I was like a -6.
Yeah, you're a plus. I'm not a plus. I'm even. So looking at the numbers now, one of the ones I'm most concerned about is and not for you, just in general.
Oh.
I'm largely concerned about our finger strength test, which is 20 millimeter 10-second hang. So 20 millimeter edge, as much weight as you can hang for 10 seconds. And yours is pretty good. At the 13C level, we generally see a 1.44 strength to weight ratio. And yours was not quite there, but it is right in the zone we want to see you in. So it's got some room to improve, but overall is pretty darn good. You were also...
My edge was bigger, though.
How big? How much bigger?
23.
Okay.
It was either 23 or an 18.
Yeah, and we get like... There's some variance there, and there always is going to be. You know, I've hung on some 25 millimeter edges that feel smaller than some 20 millimeter edges that are depending on the radius that they use. And so it's not an exact science. None of this is. You know, it really just guides where we're headed.
Right.
You also did really well in the endurance categories that we have and the general strength, which is just a pull-up quantity, push-up quantity. Those were both really high, and those numbers are high in general. Like your pull and push strength looks really good. It's balanced nicely. A lot of climbers will, you know, be able to do tons of pull-ups, and their push-ups are junk. You know, like maybe 30 pull-ups and 25 push-ups. And generally speaking, we want to see around double the number in your push-ups.
Okay.
So yours was right on. You did. I'm trying to pull that up.
It's like
here.
20 and 40 something, I want to say.
You had 20 pull-ups and 53 push-ups. So overall, generally pretty darn strong. And then the endurance stuff that we do, you were way above on almost all the metrics. Where you fell really short, and this is something that I expected to see. I see this in a lot of older climbers, trad climbers, and like I said, the people who learn to value climbing really slow, is that they can pull a lot of times, but they can't pull hard in one go. So your 1 rep max weighted pull-up was low, and as a result, the campus slaps were really low. And that's a matter of building up more pull strength, and then learning how to transfer that over to pulling power.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost technique on the power.
A lot of it is.
Not specific to the camp sport, but just in general.
Yep.
How to like generate that power, even if it's there. Do you know what I mean?
Yep,
like
totally.
The mechanics,
If you have the capacity to be able to do it,
Right.
but you don't have the coordination to make it all work.
Right.
Yeah, totally. That's a real thing. And, that's one of the reasons we do the exercise on the campus board that you were doing, exploding off your feet and latching a high rung. It's got a couple of benefits, but one of them is learning to do those explosive movements, and then once we build real pulling strength on top of that, go harder and harder at the pulling strength, then we can start to pull harder and more powerfully, and that'll transfer over to routes pretty well, I think. So I think the numbers look good. They give us a really clear path. Like, I would put a lot of emphasis at this point on that pulling strength and pulling power,
right?
And keep the finger strength going, because I think it can only help to get stronger fingers.
Right on. So I'm on the path to my dream.
I think so, for sure. And almost all of the numbers went up from our first time. I didn't give those numbers to Dale. The one that didn't go up was finger strength, and it stayed the same.
Right.
And that can be because you use different edges for both tests.
I did, and also I'm not saying my first one's real that accurate before. Like,
sure.
And that's also part of an attitude change of like, I'm definitely like, oh, I see how this all fits together now. And so like, I'm being more scientific about, why I'm doing it. So it's obvious that and the benefits I'm getting from it. So it's like paying more attention. And actually, one of the funny things about like gyms versus other gyms is one of the big problems I had in the beginning were weights.
Sure.
I didn't own any weights. I still use them. I was using brake rotors.
Yeah.
I had two Lexus
I still
and
have
two
the photo
Subaru brake rotors, which I still use. I mean, I know how much they weigh now, so it's like fine. They're big pieces of metal. But even at our gym, the way it's worked out, where the boards and like the workout areas upstairs, like there's literally like insurance problems
you
about having a
can't
bunch
have
of weights
upstairs.
So we don't have like a rack of kettlebells you can strap on you. So it's like there's kind of this hodgepodge of vests and different like ways to strap weight on you, but it's not very convenient. And so and that was it took me a little while to deal with, like, well, how do I get incremental weight increases comfortably to do hangs and stuff like that? Just to point out like these weird things that can happen in terms of being presented with a workout regime that doesn't fit with what you've got.
Yeah, and I think, there are almost always ways around those things to still get the sort of stimulus we want.
Right.
If you don't have the equipment that, would make for the ideal situation.
Right.
We can always figure out ways. You can hang on just 3 fingers, and then you're going to need a lot less weight. You can...
the truth is I can go down to frickin' Sports Authority and buy some weights, too.
Right.
They're not, like, going to break the bank.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting earlier that I want to address a little bit, and I don't even remember how you phrased it, but it reminded me that when a lot of people get these measurements, a lot of the comments are, oh, I totally bombed that, or I sucked at that so bad.
Right.
And I'm like, how do you know? Like, what are you comparing it against? Because you honestly have no idea whether you did well at that or not.
Right.
But we hear it all the time. So, it can be a really scary thing. And I didn't know if that's what was happening in your case, because I kept sending you messages like, hey, let's get these done this week, So I wasn't sure if it was like, I don't want to do these tests, I don't want a test involved. So I was just curious.
No, it was more, it was just back to like, I couldn't figure out a good time to go do them. And I did do one of them, and I was just like, well, one time I went to the gym and I was like, I need to have some fun tonight.
Yeah.
And I was
totally
like, I want
fine.
to boulder, and I did one of the other workouts. Mm-hmm. And then the other time I was just like, as soon as I started them, I was just like, you feel like dog shit. And I was just like, this is grim. Yep. So then it kind of peeled into the weekend, and I finally got them done. But it wasn't trepidation about learning anything specifically.
Okay.
I just could feel, you feel when you feel like garbage. And so I'm like, this isn't going to be a useful stat.
And it's funny it's funny that you think that, because we do tend to feel that way. I recently had a client of mine. She's a longtime client, for sure one of the most consistent people I've had. I've worked with her through her pregnancy, and she's just a crusher. And she recently took the measurements, and on the endurance stuff, on the campus laddering with her feet on, her comment was, I totally bombed that.
Right.
That sucked so bad. And she was off the charts for her goal grade.
Right on.
So far above what anything else, the highest we've seen for her goal grade. So she thought it sucked, but it turns out it's this amazing number, Yeah. So it's tough to know. And we take into account, the numbers are very unforgiving. They're they seem cold, and, it sucks to compare yourself sometimes, but that when we look at them as coaches, we try to factor in things like, oh, you're just coming off of this performance period, so the numbers are going to be lower, or you've been on vacation and haven't been training, or, you've been sick or whatever. So we want to get those measurements to continue having an idea of what direction to go, as well as see if what we've been doing is on the right track. Mm-hmm. So they aren't really tests per se. It's more just some check-in measurements, and that way we know we're on the right track or not. So
yeah, it's just natural to get testing anxiety, I think.
Yeah. But yours look good.
Thanks. All right.
Yeah, especially for rifle where you're wall crawling.
Yeah.
You don't ever actually have to pull.
Dude, I haven't been to rifle in months, so. It's out of condition, but yeah, so. Well, awesome. Well, look, I don't know if this helped people. It was kind of a different idea for a podcast. It was something we sort of talked about when I first started this. And
it's like you're coming out of the closet episode.
I know, exactly. And so it's no more excuses,
Yeah.
in terms of just... again, approaching, I talk about how, I think in your older age, it's good to just stop being a curmudgeon and open yourself up to all different types of climbing. And, I'm not necessarily got my next outdoor bouldering trip planned, but yeah, it's been a good way to open a horizon in a gym that I, didn't really have before. And,
yeah. And since you said no excuses, I'm just going to go ahead and plug my upcoming book.
No excuses.
It's done. It's going to the printers. It's called The Hard Truth. It's essentially a collection of essays kind of punching you in the face about your excuses and giving you reasons not to continue using them. And it's illustrated by our mutual friend, Brendan Leonard.
So, right on.
So that should be out this spring.
Cool.
Yeah.
And just, part of this was to talk about how good a time I've had with you in terms of this being an extremely positive experience at 30 years into climbing. This is my 30th year climbing.
Yeah.
And to have this new thing happen to me that's, opened up this other avenue to climbing and kept me excited. And I really do enjoy going and doing it most nights, and part of it is just doing it when you're not enjoying it. But anyway, so I just want to also promote what you're doing. And awesome. I know there's other companies that do a great job in a similar thing.
Yeah, there's tons of great companies out there, and we all have slightly different takes on things, and, find who fits you. There's a bunch of great companies doing it now. So
right on.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, Kris.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening to that. You got this far. And thanks to Kris for coming in and sitting down, but also for being my coach. Also, Kris has a podcast at thepowercompanyclimbing.com. You can find his podcast. Very training oriented, but goes a little deeper than that quite often. So check that out if you're looking for more climbing podcasts and you weren't aware of that one. But yeah, let's do a little update. It's been several months since I recorded that interview. That was done back in February or maybe late January even. And things progressed along, of course, right up until the shutdown with Climbing Outdoors. And we talked a minute about a crack project in there, which I have a complicated success story with that. It's a 2-pitch climb out in Utah called Trail of Tears, a 513, first pitch 12 plus, second pitch 513 minus-ish, and goes at 50 meters from the ground if you do both pitches together. And then I added about a 10-meter extension that's probably like techie 12 plus as well. And I decided that I wanted to climb it all the way from the ground at 60 meters, just exactly 60 meters. I aided it with a 60-meter rope once, and I ran out of rope almost at the anchor. So the success story was that I climbed the first 2 pitches, the 50-meter older route, 2 pitches as one, clipped those anchors, kept going, and then I fell literally at about meter 59, which I knew could happen because there's a little boulder problem up there just to finish it off to the ledge, and I just ran out of gas, man. But the success was I hadn't led the first 50 meters as one pitch before, which constitutes a hard 513 crack. So there you go. Just before my 49th birthday, was successful on that part of it. But I do have to go back to finish that meter of climbing at the top next fall. So anyway, like I said, take your successes where you can get them, I suppose. But have I been doing well in Corona lockdown? Not really, I'm going to admit. I came out, like a lot of people, just started banging them out with the hangboards and the TRX workouts and stuff. But I did start to slack, I'll admit. And it's been a little bit up and down, mostly because my whole schedule changed. And the aforementioned Enormo baby, who's now an Enormo child, has been home from school for 70-some days. So before I had him in daycare for 4 days a week, and now he's home all the time. So it changed my schedule, and that really kind of shook things up. But I have been climbing outdoors. I was successful on a 513 in rifle just a few days ago. So yeah, I'm still banging it out. I also turned 49. So there you go. Put that into the mix. So that's how training life is going. But I'm committed to kind of buckling down here in the coming weeks. And the gyms are about to open, but again, I'm not sure if I can go yet. I'm just not sure about touching those gross holds because they're gross to begin with, and now we got the coronavirus. So we'll see. We'll see if I can muster that. Anyhow, hope you guys were inspired a little bit, because if I can do it, you can do it. And if you're already doing it, maybe some of my frustrations and problems helped you kind of straighten your head out around it. And if you're already really into training and do it really well, then maybe you had a good laugh at my expense. That's fine. I don't mind at all. But I've been pretty happy with it. And if you feel like you don't have time to do it, let me tell you, you can find time. All right, folks, we are climbing outside now, I hope. If you can get outside, get outside. If you can do it safely, if you can do the distance thing, if you got some crags where you live, please get out there, because it's such a mental release valve. It's so important right now. It feels just as soul scrubbing as it ever has in my life. I've been out in rifle in the evening the last few weeks and just marveled at how wonderful it is to be out doing what we do. And of course we know that, but sometimes it takes something like this to remind you just how awesome going climbing is and how awesome the climbing community is, right? Okay, but remember, you're also rusty as fuck. And you're amped. And being rusty and amped, not a good combination. Okay, so take it easy. Check your systems. Check your communication. And of course, check your knot.
But what is best in life? The open steppe, the fleet horse, falcons at your wrist, the wind in your hair. Wrong! Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of your women. That is good. That is good.